In America, everyone counts, and the 2020 census is how that great promise is kept. Respond today online, by phone, or by mail, and help inform hundreds of billions in funding for education, health programs, and more. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov. Republican South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham is tied with his Democratic challenger Jaime Harrison for the U.S. Senate race. According to a new Quinnipiac University survey released yesterday, the poll shows both Graham and Harrison at 48% among likely South Carolina voters. Since winning his seat in 2002, Graham has been easily reelected by double-digit margins. Joining me now to discuss this race is Meg Kinnard, national politics reporter for the Associated Press, based there in South Carolina. Meg, are these polls real? I mean, are we actually seeing this race this tight in South Carolina?
Hey, Roland, it's always good to be back with you. You know, these polls they're really something. But again, let's not send Lindsey Graham back to Washington for a fourth term. Let's put a Democrat in office in representing this state. But again, it's really difficult to take the temperature in this state when you look at a race that has had a lot of campaign fundraising numbers. It's really eye-popping to look at both sides of the race in terms of the money that's been brought in. Today, DSCC announces that they're spending 7 figures on this state in the next, 43, 44 days now until Election Day. So that's a lot of money that's going to be putting a lot more TV ads, a lot more digital ads, and giving voters a lot more of the ads and all of the stuff that we've really been seeing here for well over a year now from Jaime Harrison and Lindsey Graham. But it's not Election Day yet, and that's the one that really matters.
And obviously, polls are polls, but the reality is this here. Democrats would not be putting these kind of resources into a race in South Carolina if they did not think that this was possible. What has happened in that state to even show Harrison running this tight? Is it dissatisfaction with Donald Trump? He won South Carolina by 16 points in 2016. Polling data right now shows he's only up 4. Is it the suburbs in South Carolina? What's going on in that state from your perspective?
We are seeing a lot of changes in the electorate here in South Carolina. You're absolutely right that Donald Trump had a large margin of victory here. In his last campaign in 2014, Lindsey Graham defeated his Democratic challenger by double digits there as well. But here in South Carolina, particularly in the coastal areas in and around Charleston, there's been an influx of people moving here from places outside the state. South Carolina is lovely. I've lived here and reported on politics for 15 years. And we're seeing a lot of people coming from more politically liberal areas of the country and making South Carolina their home. I'm not saying that South Carolina is going out and out blue in 2020. I'm not going to make that prediction. But there are some changes in terms of the voters who now consider themselves South Carolinians and whom they're going to be supporting in the Senate race, in congressional races like Joe Cunningham, who is trying to defend his flip of that Charleston congressional seat from 2018 and keep it out of Republican hands. So there are a lot of different people who represent the electorate here, and that does represent perhaps some of the mentality of voters saying, well, perhaps we're ready to look more closely at a Democratic candidate statewide than we had before.
But we also saw a massive Democratic turnout in the primary there, higher numbers than what we even saw when Obama ran in 2008, knowing full well that African Americans make up 50 or some say upwards of 60% of Democratic voters. That, I think, was a telltale sign in terms of how Democrats are fired up in that state about getting rid of Donald Trump and those who support him.
There's a lot of interest here. You're absolutely right. The Democratic primary contest, which went on for over 2 years, as far as I was involved with it, gained a lot of attention and was, as you note, a Democratic contest. There wasn't a Republican primary here. So the Democrats really had the stage for well over a year in terms of really making their cases and arguing the party's perspectives on issues. But let's think back to the 2016 campaign for the presidential race. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were tied here in South Carolina at that point. So even though we do see these polls of statewide voters tightening, even though Democrats have been pouring a lot of national attention and money into this race, we've seen PACs pop up, including the Lindsey Must Go PAC, which is spending $300,000 just this week on a television ad in the Charleston area trying to make the case against Lindsey Graham. Yes, there is a lot of attention and focus statewide in terms of making that case that Democrats need to represent the state statewide, need to go to the Senate, need to perhaps occupy the White House on behalf of South Carolina. So you're right, we wouldn't be seeing a lot of that attention if not for the presidential campaign and the very heavily contested primary that we just went through. But this is still South Carolina. A Democrat has not won here statewide in 15 years. So this is still Lindsey Graham's, at this point, his race to lose.
African American, are we seeing an increase in black voter registration there? Again, I know Jaime Harrison is really depending upon black support there. Look, a lot of black folks cannot stand Donald Trump. We saw how they helped Joe Biden win and really correct his campaign when he won in February. Are we seeing intensity there among black voters?
There is a lot of intensity. There's a lot of activity among black voters here in South Carolina. You're right that they do make up most of the Democratic voters here, but obviously those aren't the only folks who are going to the polls in November. So yes, Jaime Harrison is focusing intently on black voters in South Carolina. He knows that he needs their support in order to make a strong case against Lindsey Graham, but he doesn't just need black voters. He needs a very broad base of support to oust a three-term Republican incumbent from a Senate seat in South Carolina. So, yes, there's a lot of focus on black voters, but he needs to be broadening that base as well. All
right, Meg Kinnard, Associated Press. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Anytime.
All right, let's go to my panel. Erica Savage-Wilson, host, Savage Politics Podcast. Dr. Greg Carr, chair, Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. And Reese Colbert, Black Women Views. Folks, we are, look, under 50 days left. Go ahead and pull the graphic up, people, showing how many days left when it comes to this election. 46 days before the election. We're already seeing what is happening across the country where Donald Trump and his people are trying to really target voters, going after different states, trying to keep them from even having real elections. Go to my iPad, please. This is the vote.org website where you can check your registration. I need every single one of you to double check your registration. I've had people who watch this show tell me that they had registration cards in their hands and they realized that they had been purged. So every person needs to first check your registration. More than 300,000 people were purged in Georgia. 198,000 of them were in error. Folks, that was the election that determined that allowed Brian Kemp to beat Stacey Abrams. That was stolen. So we have to understand that. And so I want to start with you, Greg. When we look at in terms of this race in South Carolina, yes, the polls are showing that they are tied right now. But you look at what's happening in North Carolina, where the Democrat Cunningham is up 6 to 8 points over Republican Tom Tillis. You look at what's happening in Arizona. Mark Kelly, he is up 10 points against McSally in Arizona. You look at a 12-point lead by the Democrat over Susan Collins in Maine. You also see Amy McGrath. I think the people of Kentucky should realize they screwed up not giving the primary win to Charles Booker. She's down 12 points with all that money that she has, down 12 points to Mitch McConnell because, frankly, she's a boring candidate. She's Republican light. But what we're dealing with here, polls are coming out, even showing Joe Biden doing much better among college-educated white voters in Arizona, in Minnesota, is in Wisconsin. And so what this comes down to, Greg, is pure and simple, like any election, is turnout. Can you turn out more of your people than the other side?
Yeah, you're right, Roland. It's very simple. The polls are lying because many white voters are lying. I won't call them liars, but they are lying. The Bradley effect, that maybe some of the viewers who are too young to remember the mayor of Los Angeles, Tom Bradley, when polled, it looked like he was up for the election, and then he lost that first election because white people lied to the pollsters. So you could ignore the polls. Election day is not the first Tuesday in November. It is the first Tuesday in November in South Carolina because there's no early voting.
Right.
You got to bring that photo ID. They let you bring your damn concealed carry license, but no student ID. So they've set it up. Those white supremacists in that old reef, the first state to secede from the Union, South Carolina. However, voting day in North Carolina is October the 15th. You can vote on the 15th, 16th, 17th, all the way to the 31st of October. Bank the vote. In Arizona, early voting starts on the 7th. So don't think of November, the first Tuesday of November as voting day. Think of the first day, think rather of October the 7th as your voting day. Let's go out here and bank the vote so that all you do in November is all the people that voted, go get the ones that didn't and take them to the poll. Because I don't trust the mail either, frankly. But the point is that Jaime Harrison is behind in South Carolina. Ignore the polls. Vote.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the points that we've been saying, Reese, at the end of the day, that you can't depend on polls. Polls are important, though, because it gives you a snapshot of where the race is right now. Mike Espy, we had on the show the other day, he tweeted earlier, he is down 5 points to Cindy Hyde-Smith in Mississippi. I mean, again, if Democrats actually invested money in South Carolina, in Mississippi, that could be closer. Look, he only lost by 68,000 votes when he ran against her in 2018. And so turnout. And again, what I need black people. Look, I know there are people who watch me who are white and Latino, but here's the deal. Black people, in order for us to affect change, we must maximize our power. It does not make sense in the past, what Jamie is trying to do. You had 250,000 black people in South Carolina not registered to vote. You got hundreds of thousands in Georgia. You got people in Mississippi. Again, this is no time to be sitting on your ass doing nothing.
Right.
No, I mean, we have no choice. Like, we literally do not have any choice. I'm not a poll truther, so I do believe that the polls can be instructive in terms of, like, for instance, it's a better investment to put money towards Jaime Harrison versus Amy McGrath. I know conventional wisdom, she's a white woman, and, you know, knocking off.
She's a veteran and all this sort of stuff. But she's boring as hell. She's not interesting. And again, the fact that she spent all that money and barely beat Booker shows her weakness as a candidate.
Yeah.
Right. And so polls can be a gift and a curse. They can be a gift in the case of Jaime Harrison, where it shows a much closer race than anybody would have predicted. I do think that the Democrats, generally speaking, are better positioned than the media would like to make this more of a horse race. But regardless of what the polls say, I will say that the most important thing is banking the votes, as Dr. Carr mentioned. We cannot rely on polls, because then you have this group of people that will say, oh, there's no point. This is in the bag. I don't have to waste my time. And then they get to do all these little purity tests, and they get to do these ridiculous lesser of two evil kind of calculations where they say, I don't want to, cast my vote. But black people, we have so much at stake. I mean, not just black people, but people across the country. I mean, just today, I don't know if we're going to talk about it, it came out that Donald Trump, his administration, stopped the post office from sending out 5 reusable masks to every single household in this country in early April. Imagine the lives that would have been saved if that kind of if that kind of resources would have been sent to every single American household. So the way that our government has been politicized and our public health response has been politicized, this is literally a matter of life and death. This isn't a matter of who you like more. This isn't a matter of personality. It's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of the economy. If we'll ever war back, black people have been disproportionately left behind in the so-called economic recovery that's started to happen as the economy has reopened. So we have more at stake than anybody else. If for no other reason, for your own self-interest, if for your own survival, you have to vote. And it's not good enough to just say on November 3rd, I'm going to vote. You have to check your registration. You have to double check it. You have to come up with the voting plan A, B, and C. And if you have it all together, then like you said, I don't remember if it was Roland or Dr. Carr, bring somebody with you who hasn't already done all those things. It has to be a collective effort in 2020.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. As our community comes together to support the fight against racial injustice, I want to take a second to talk about one thing we can do to ensure our voices are heard. Not tomorrow, but now. Have your voices heard in terms of what kind of future we want by taking the 2020 census today at 2020census.gov? Now, folks, let me help you out. The census is a count of everyone living in the country. It happens once every 10 years. It is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. The thing that's important is that the census informs funding, billions of dollars, how they are spent in our communities every single year. I grew up in Clinton Park in Houston, Texas, and we wanted new parks and roads and a senior citizen center. Well, the census helps inform all of that and where funding goes. It also determines how many seats your state will get in the U.S. House of Representatives. Young black men and young children of color are historically undercounted, which means a potential loss of funding for services that helps our community. Folks, we have the power to change that. We have the power to help determine where hundreds of billions in federal funding go each year for the next 10 years. Funding that can impact our community, our neighborhoods, and our families and friends. Folks, responses are 100% confidential and can't be shared with your landlord, law enforcement, or any government agency. So please take the 2020 census today. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov.